A very good evening, Africa, and welcome to Bottom Line Africa, right on KTN News. It is a politically charged day across the continent. Down south, Zimbabwe's strongman Robert Mugabe has this evening fired his disloyal deputy. Right here in Kenya, there's only 2 hours left for the Supreme Court registry to receive any petition challenging the October 26th re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta. In Liberia, the presidential runoff scheduled for tomorrow will not take place. This is according to the Supreme Court orders there. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim, taking you through this and much more stories right here on Bottom Line Africa. But first, a quick look at Africa in 60 seconds. Ex-Kilome Member of Parliament Harun Ndubi among those that have filed petitions at the Supreme Court challenging the October 26th election of Uhuru Kenyatta. Plans to hold a presidential runoff in Liberia on Tuesday is scuttled as the Supreme Court delays the exercise indefinitely over irregularities. Doctors in Uganda made good their industrial action threat despite a warning by the government. And tonight, we'll look at the space for civil society organizations and governance in the wake of recent developments in Kenya. And of course, our Twitter poll tonight is informed by that last bit on our highlight, which has everything to do with civil societies in this country. And we're asking you, do you believe there is a deliberate attempt to curtail civil liberties in Kenya? Do you believe there is a deliberate attempt to curtail civil liberties in Kenya? This is after summons were issued against 3 civil organizations, including Katiba Institute, Muslims for Human Rights, that is Muhuri, as well as Inuka Trust. And of course, that is going to form the basis of our discussion tonight. You know that the drill, our Twitter handle is at KTN News. You can as well tweet me at Yusuf Ibra. Our bottom hashtag tonight is Bottom Line Africa. And tonight in studio, we have Daisy Amdani, who is the coordinator, National Women Steering Committee. She is also a member of Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu. We also have Zahid Rajanu, who is a civil society activist and member of We the People. Unfortunately, we couldn't get hold of Khalif Khalifa, who was supposed to join us all the way from the coastal city of Mombasa. He is the Muhuri director, and apparently is one of the petitioners. They're challenging the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta on October 26th. But let's go to the center of attention tonight, and that is the Supreme Court of Kenya, and that is where our Sophia Wanuna is on standby. Now, Sophia, good evening. I understand there are several petitions that have been filed at the Supreme Court of Kenya, the last one by the ICG Kenyan chapter chairman, Njonjo Moe. Can you perhaps take us through some of his prayers there?
Yusuf, a good evening to you. I'll take you shortly through the other petitions that were filed earlier by Harun Ndubi, as well as one by the Initiative of Governance, Democratic Governance, I beg your pardon. But just moments ago, one has been filed by Njonjo Moe alongside Khalif Khalifa. I'm joined by one of their lawyers, that's Harun Ndubi. Thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about this petition. I've talked about the 2 petitioners. Who are the respondents?
In this new petition we just filed, the respondents are the chairperson of the IEBC, being the national returning officer of the presidential election. We have the IEBC as the commission. We have NASA as well as President Uhuru Kenyatta as the respondents. All right.
And what is the basis, the backbone of this petition?
The backbone of the petition is actually multiple-fold. On the one hand, we are demonstrating, I hope that it will be seen when the petition gets to be heard, that the fresh election that was held on 26th of October was an illegal election. We hope to demonstrate that notwithstanding that illegality, the Commission as well as the National Returning Officer were so irredeemably incompetent that what they did was just a farce, does not pass legal muster. We are also seeking to demonstrate that they committed irregularities and illegalities in that election that would serve to invalidate it yet again. We will be demonstrating, among other things as well, that the commission was so partial to one side that it wasn't able to run an election. Of course, remember that there is the issue of taking away of the right to vote, universal suffrage, that you will recall that there are various constituencies that elections were cancelled or called off without following the law. We saw the purported election being conducted in a manner that is contrary to the law, where strangers were gazetted as candidates. On the other hand, the gazettement that was effected even after one person had withdrawn, the IEBC and the National Returning Officer insisted on forcing a person to be a candidate and therefore confusing the voter. And more important, I think we need to say that the petition is seeking to emphasize the right to vote, the quality of the vote, that the vote must count and must be meaningful. Because ideally, elections are the only legal means where the people express their consent to who shall be their president or form government.
One of your prayers is to invalidate the election. Is it correct that you're also seeking the court to find criminal liability on the part of the electoral officials this time around?
No. Criminal liability is a matter to be investigated by the DPP. We already know that in the previous election of August 8th, we had petitioned the DPP and is still investigating. What we are asking the court to do is to find that the commission committed offences such that even if there will be no criminal sanction or penalty, that those offences will serve to invalidate that election.
Final question. I've scanned through the prayers you've made. The fourth respondent is NASA. However, there's no prayer you're making against NASA.
NASA does not manage elections in this country. What we are saying, the reason it is a respondent is that it also precipitated or caused a situation that would that provided an environment that was not conducive for an election. That's the only reason. And if there are prayers to be made against NASA, I don't see any. It's probably the DPP and the election management body to deal with NASA as they would deem fit according to the law.
All right. Many thanks. Many thanks, Harun Ndubi, one of the counsel for John Jamwe and Halifa Yusuf. They just filed their petition. In fact, right now, still in the process of winding up in as far as the requisite fees as they must make, the payment they must make at the registry here at the Supreme Court. I've also just run through the other of their prayers, which perhaps counsel has not mentioned. They want the finding that if the fact there were no nomination exercises before the 26th repeat presidential election, then it should be nullified. They want all the Form 32As, which is that complementary system that was used by those who are not biometrically identified as well, be submitted to the Supreme Court 48 hours after this petition is filed. They want all the KIMS kits, the SD cards, all availed here, all the Forms 34A, B, as well as C, presented to the Supreme Court, and of course access as well granted to them as the petitioner. They also want what they're describing as unredacted voters register, because they say some of the information from that KPMG report did not make it to the public, so they want that as well presented. Yusuf, to run you through the other two petitions that were filed today. The first one earlier on in the day, Harun Mwau, former Kiloba Member of Parliament, filed a petition. Again, the basis for that is around nominations. He argues that this election cannot be deemed to have been conducted in accordance to the law because there were no nominations. That when the Supreme Court invalidated this election, in essence, it went back to scratch. So that the entire process, which includes nominations of candidates, was voided, was negated, it was all moot. and therefore there were no grounds for this. And he goes further when you read the petition to break down the sphere and scope of these nominations, including even the fees and the campaign period as well, and raises that critical question. We saw that back and forth with the IEBC, Yusuf, in gazetting of candidates, saying IEBC conducted itself irregularly. Because remember, Yusuf, following the annulling of this election, the 8th of August presidential election, that is, the IEBC then went on to gazette Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, 2 candidates. After that, however, they amended that, gazetting 8 candidates. Further amending that and expanding the name of Cyrus Jirongo, and went on further, Yusuf, the intrigues we have seen in the recent weeks, to return and have the name of Cyrus Jirongo, who had initially been cited as bankrupt, back to the list. So quite a number of issues been raised in the Harun Ndubi petition. In that particular matter, the respondents, IEBC, the IEBC chair, and Uhuru Kenyatta. And then there's the other petition, not quite a presidential petition, but one by IGD, which is Initiative Governance Institute, I beg your pardon, and they have filed a petition against Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula, Musalia Mudavadi, as well as James Orengo. And in that petition, they argue that these individuals committed electoral offences and malpractices. And they go ahead to say by so doing, they violated the rights of Kenyan citizens. They also want the court to find that these 5 individuals are unfit to hold public office. Yusuf, they further say that this election offences and malpractices led to losses in terms of property and otherwise, and want these individuals to be found liable for this. So Yusuf, in a nutshell, or not so much of a nutshell there, those are the petitions we are looking at today. However, a quick one, because it's also trending. There are 2 young men that came here, flanked by others, and a group calling themselves Black Flag. And they had a 9-page petition that they have submitted here at the registry. It's still been considered, and they're arguing that the election should be invalidated on the grounds that the violence that was witnessed and the lives that were lost, that in itself was not an environment for an election, and because of these incidences, this election should not hold, and also that it wasn't conducted in 25 constituencies. So that's still been considered, because officials saying there the issue is that it does not meet the threshold of a presidential election petition. And one more, there's been a prophet around here. He showed me a document he's calling a presidential election petition. It has been rejected because if you look at it, Yusuf, it has quite some scary images on it. Snakes, it has all these leaders with all these crazy animals on their heads. And he's saying that this election should be invalidated because they are not people who are conducting themselves in accordance to the Lord. So that one, once he attempted to submit it at the registry, was rejected because they argued it did not in any way, form or fashion meet the threshold. But back to the other 2 gentlemen who are petitioners, who are seeking to be petitioners, Yusuf, they also are seeking to have the fees that are charged on this presidential election petitions by the Supreme Court waived, which is a pauper's kind of an application. Pauper, I beg your pardon, saying that the law envisages a situation where Kenyans who do not have the means, cannot afford, can still be able to seek recourse. Over to you, Yusuf.
Clearly, Sophia, there it's not just a long night, but a dramatic one tonight, and I'm sure the Supreme Court registry also, they're going to have a very busy night, and we're counting just less than 2 hours before they're going to close their door. Perhaps one final question, Sophia. I know you've also had a very long day there, and do we expect some more petitions, perhaps?
It's difficult to tell. There have been reports of all kinds about who will come, who may come. So now we have 3 family received, officially that is, received by the registry. Earlier, I had indicated when I was speaking to Linda, we had seen 2 journalists who usually cover the National Super Alliance. They're not journalists really, but in the mainstream media, but officially are with the National Super Alliance. Every of the events, you'll find them there. So earlier, speculation was rife that could NASA as well make its way here to file, because as much as they boycotted the election, it is within their rights to file a petition challenging this election. So the presence of those two journalists who are attached to the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has been telling, but then again, they could just be here to cover it for posterity. Over to you, Yusuf.